All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you guys for joining us today. We've got a pretty exciting talk about skin and skin health. And I'm joined by Dr. Mary today, and I'm Dr. Molly. I'm the clinical director here at Prosper Natural Health. And we also have a wonderful colleague, Dr. Rosalie, who's not able to make it this time because she just had her baby. I think it was just a month ago, so just a few weeks old, and everybody's happy and healthy and at home. So we wanted to make sure that as we were talking today, that we made an effort to answer all you guys' questions that come up. So make sure to put your questions in the chat and we can make sure to adjust those at the end. There's a lot of information we're going to be covering, and this specific topic, we decided to intersperse some of our tips throughout rather than just giving them all to you at the very end. And we're going to be talking a lot about things like diet and how our gut microbiome affects our skin, and really important things that we can be doing on the daily basis to really support our skin health. So, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a lot of information out of this. So once again, put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those at the very end. So today we want to talk about the skin, and we wanted to make sure we thought about what the skin is supposed to be doing in the first place before we talk about treatments to make it more healthy. So our skin, of course, is this outer shell, and it's really truly a barrier system for our body. It's actually our largest organ. It's about 15% of our body weight, which is pretty impressive. There are two main layers of the skin. There's the dermis and the epidermis. And the dermis itself is really more connective tissue. The height of the skin varies between about 1 millimeter up to 6 mils on our palms and soles, those thicker areas. And one of the most important things that our skin does is it's a host to our microbiome. And our microbiome is essentially our healthy organisms that live symbiotically with us. And we're going to talk about why that's so important today, because it's a very under discussed thing, I believe, when it comes to skincare. So we have these wonderful protective benefits from the skin in that it's our barrier, and it also has an antimicrobial action, and we're going to talk about why and how that works here as well. It's also, as you guys know, a sensory organ. So remember, the skin is helping give us information, not just about the temperature and things around us and how soft and cold things are, but even things like movement can be detected by the skin, as far as things like wind and things moving around us. So we want to keep the skin as healthy as possible. And one of the pieces with skin that we wanted to make sure we talked about was the pH. So the pH of the skin is going to be really important because it helps us host our friendly microbiome. And we have this, what we call an acid mantle to the skin. Most of the skin has a pH around 4.7. So it's an acidic environment that the skin has. And that can be really influenced by the things that we put on our skin, what we're exposed to, things like makeup, skin creams, soap, even drinking alcohol and certain dietary changes can affect our acid mantle of our skin. And if we don't have that healthy acid mantle, that healthy environment, then we're going to have a breakdown of our good microbes on our skin. And that's going to lead to more inflammation and more damage for the skin and for the rest of our organs in turn. So we really want to protect that healthy acid mantle because it essentially helps protect us from environmental stressors by keeping our barrier system intact. So what's skin made of? It's really a lot of water. It's 70% water, 25% protein, and then 3% fat. So we also have a little bit of minerals and nucleic acids, aminoglycosides, and proteoglycans that make up the skin. But essentially, we're thinking about a lot of water here. And the reason that's important is one of the things that you guys might have heard many times is how important water is for your skin and staying hydrated is for your skin. And that's because of the base content of the skin itself being so much water. Now, I also just wanted to make sure that we reviewed real quick. So we've got these different layers of the skin, and here it's laying on this muscle belly. We have the hypodermis and the dermis. In the epidermis, we have hair follicles that are embedded here in our skin, and we have this really important structure here, the sebaceous gland, that's going to help with oil regulation of our skin. And then within our skin, we also have our sweat glands, and these are very important because our skin, we will find, is one of our very important organs of elimination, and our sweat is considered a secondary emunctory, which means something that helps us express and remove different toxins and toxicants from our body. So it really helps with our physiologic balance. Now, as far as the water component, I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Mary, and we're going to give you a few tips right away here.
Okay, so as Dr. Molly was just mentioning, our skin is made up of 70% water, 25% proteins, and 3% lipids. So as we're kind of going throughout our day, thinking about daily skin health, we need to think about supplying the foundational structure for our skin through our diet. So getting enough water each day is essential for allowing for the flushing of your skin cells, for allowing hydration of your skin cells. And our typical recommendations around water consumption are half of your body weight in ounces. So for instance, if you weigh 150 pounds, then you're trying to drink 75 ounces of water each day, which is a lot of water. And people are always a little surprised by that, but it's great to kind of know what the goal is to start off with. The other thing we want to think about is eating healthy fats. So there are certain fats that are going to be more pro-inflammatory in our diet, and certain fats that are going to be more anti-inflammatory in our diet. And our skin is one of our major organs that responds to inflammation. Um, so, especially if you're dealing with, things like eczema and psoriasis or acne, that's very inflammatory conditions. And so here we really want to think about loading ourselves with healthy fats, including omega-3 fatty acids. So that's going to include fish oils and marine lipids, um, butter from pasture-raised cows, extra virgin olive oil, flax oil, things like coconut oil and egg yolks in moderation, and then raw nuts and seeds and avocado oil are going to be really great sources of those omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids.
So, as promised, we wanted to make sure we spent time talking about this microbiome because we're going to find that so much of our skin health comes down to the microbes that we host on it. So, on our body, we have different areas that function differently for the skin. So, there's oilier skin areas that can be found like on our forehead, the folds of our ears, for example. We have more moist area, as you can see from this little diagram here, that is going to be more in like the armpit area or our groin area. And then we have our drier skin, which is, like on our arms or even on our palms. And even our feet have a different ecosystem. So each of these different regions have a different set of microbes that they typically host. Now, there's a really cool article through Nature magazine and found on nature.com. And so I'd love you guys to go and check it out. But we took some of the pictures from this article to share with you guys today, just the impact that this microbiome that our skin has can have on our overall health. So we want to think about these different regions and how they're going to host these different microbes and how that might impact our skin depending on what our activities are that might be influencing those. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, we've broken down for you guys here some of the moist sites and the dry sites, and these more sebaceous sites, these oilier sites, and how they are hosting different types of microbes. So that just kind of gives you a visual there. And it's pretty cool because these helpers for us are really protecting us from inflammation and from damage. So not just microbial damage, but also chemical damage. So here is this nice image of our good microbes sitting on top of our skin here. And we can see that when pathogens come in, there's going to be certain peptides and certain proteins that our good, healthy flora is going to create that helps protect us as a barrier system, kind of on the front lines here, from these pathogens. And depending on what's going on with these microbes, they can actually be eating and be coexisting here with our oils from the sebaceous glands. And we actually, by doing this, create this inhospitable region for pathogens. Now, different strains are going to be of these microbes are found in different areas. So there is this, context matters sort of piece here. So we think about a different skin community on our hand, for example, than on our face. And there can be these pro-inflammatory molecules that are created when certain flora is exposed to different pathogens or different microbes show up in areas that they shouldn't be. So a mismatch or an imbalance of our microbiome in certain areas can lead to these more inflammatory events. And here's the kind of biochemical components here that are happening here in a picture form. So when we have these, healthy bacteria that can create what they call it a quorum sensing. So it's like enough of the microbes that can block other microbes and other infections from happening. Then we've got a healthy and intact skin system here. But if our microbes become disrupted and start producing these highly inflammatory biochemicals, then our epidermal layer of this barrier itself can be broken through, and then we get these immune reactions. And within these immune reactions, our mast cells and our T helper cells, these are going to be eliciting these really strong immune responses and causing inflammation for the body. So we absolutely want to support our good microbiome in these different regions of our body so that they can really stand up to external toxins and external pathogens and help reduce our inflammatory load. So we care about this so much because we know that the microbiome regulates our immune response, and that's going to ultimately influence our inflammatory response. We know that it helps regulate tissue pH, so that acid mantle that we were talking about in the beginning, our microbiome helps keep that secure there at that correct pH, which helps in turn more of the good bacteria populating that area and protecting us. We know that it can affect our nutrient absorption, especially when we're thinking about internally in our gut. It affects our metabolism. Even our aging is tied to our gut microbiome and our skin microbiome. And then cell division, mental function, cognitive function, and then our hormonal function even. So it has a very big scope here for the microbiome, and we don't want to forget how important our hosting job is for our skin. So remember that a good gut health is going to be reflected in good skin health. So there's a really important connection there. And so we want to take a second and just say, hey, we need these probiotics and prebiotics in our diet. So as you guys probably know, our probiotics are considered those good, healthy flora that make up our microbiome. And we can get those in some really wonderful fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurts, different kefir, even miso and kombucha. And then our prebiotics are going to be the food sources for those microbes, for those probiotics. So those are our fiber rich foods. And specifically, we've got some really good sources in the onion family, including garlic, and then certain whole grains like oats, and different veggie fibers and fruit fibers are going to provide those for us in our diet.
Okay. So next, I want to just kind of run through some of the major categories of influences when it comes to daily skin health. So we have already discussed our diet. Um, a lot of what we think about with skin is actually going to start internally. So we need to kind of provide the healthy landscape internally that will be reflected externally. So diet, including, nutrients, proteins and fats that are anti-inflammatory. And then we've got hydration and water. So again, drinking half of your body weight in ounces per day, and really just, keeping that a regular routine. And then we want to think about illness, inflammation, and autoimmune conditions. So, a lot of these, things that express on our skin are are rooted in inflammatory processes that are happening in our other organs and within our immune system. So things like eczema and psoriasis are an immune reaction where our immune system is actually reacting to our skin cells. And then we also have, um, other illnesses that will cause full body rashes, medication reactions that cause full body rashes and redness. And then our hormones are a huge player. So we know that estrogen, higher estrogen, can be really helpful for acne, and that the hormonal fluctuations are really what can cause a lot of issues with acne. So it's really common for people to have an acne breakout right before menses, for instance, because that's when your estrogen and progesterone are really taking a deep dive. And then we've got testosterone. We know that testosterone in high amounts can increase our propensity to get acne. And then, so in addition to the internal, we've got these external factors like chemicals. So, chemicals in our water, there's all kinds of chlorine and other things that are added that can irritate our skin. So, it's great if you have the opportunity to use filtered water. That's a really good idea. And then, makeup and lotions can be really irritating depending on what's in them and how you personally are reacting to them. Um, and then lastly, we have the environment. So the effects of UV radiation can cause kind of early skin aging and predispose us to skin cancers. We've got air quality, so our chemicals in the air. Also, pollens, especially this time of year, is a big deal and can really contribute to systemic inflammatory factors for many folks. Um, and yeah, last we have kind of more of our environmental factors like temperature and humidity. In the winter months when we're indoors and the heating systems are on, we can get a lot of dryness. And so paying attention to moisturizing during that time is a big deal. And then lastly, we've got our genetics. So that's the DNA that we get from our parents that will predispose us to some conditions, whether, often autoimmune conditions are genetically related. And then we also have this interesting concept called the Constitution. And this is recognized in most traditional medicines. And it's essentially a way of kind of categorizing people by their makeup, how they present and how they respond to different treatments. And it's a really beautiful way of recognizing that we're all individual and that we will all respond in different ways. For instance, some people do really well with coconut oil, and other people do really well with sesame oil. And this is all based on this sense of whether or not you have dry skin or oily skin. And by kind of categorizing these people into these larger patterns, traditional medicine doctors have been able to get a sense of how to individualize treatments. So here's an example from the Ayurvedic tradition. And we have a couple of different skin types that are based on someone's overall constitution. So in Ayurveda, the three major constitutions are going to be Pitta, which is very heating. You tend to have a lot of kind of red inflammatory conditions when it comes to the skin. And Pitta people tend to be really driven and, tend towards anger and also just very, timely and kind of driven people. And then we've got the Vata constitution that tends to be more dry and cold. And you'll often see issues with skin dryness and nerve conditions in Vata people. And they tend to be kind of more anxious, like a little less grounded, and tend to be very heady people, and tend to be kind of like tall and skinny. And then we've got Kapha. Kapha is the other constitution that is associated with groundedness and earth. Kapha people tend to be very warm or sort of very like loving and caring and kind of on the heavier side, and tend to have more oily skin. Um, and within each of these categories, these different constitutions can present in different amounts. So it's not like you fit into one category or the other. But the idea is that then we can take an herb and say, is this a heating herb? Is this a cooling herb? Is this a drying herb? And how is that going to interact with your particular constitution? So if you're a Pitta person and you get rosacea, or you get, angry red acne or psoriasis, we may want to consider cooling, moisturizing treatments for that skin condition. So aloe is kind of the classic cooling, moisturizing treatment for a Pitta condition. So here's an example of a Pitta condition, and this is also a good opportunity for us to just talk through eczema and psoriasis and some of the differences between them. So eczema these are both very common conditions and kind of present similarly, but have some key diagnostic factors that are different between them. So eczema tends to present kind of in the folds of people's armpits, knee pits, can often kind of present on someone's neck, various parts of the body, but some of the main areas are these folds. And more common in infants and children, um, and kind of tend to be more related to irritation from substances and allergies. So there's a very strong correlation between asthma, allergic rhinitis, and eczema. And And then people tend to be more sensitive to skin products and, detergents and that kind of thing. Um, so with that, you'll have more intense, persistent itching, and then it'll often affect the body parts that we were mentioning. Versus psoriasis is going to show up on the exterior parts of the joints, so the exterior elbows, the kind of fronts of the knees. And this is going to present as more kind of scaly patches that can sometimes almost appear silvery, versus the more redness of the eczema piece. And it's, this is caused by a combination of genetics, infections, and emotional stress. Emotional stress is huge with psoriasis. That's one of the kind of main patterns that we look at. And you'll have more of a stinging and burning sensation versus the itching. And so interestingly, though, both of these are often associated with pitta and can have elements of vata in them. And so we're using a lot of those kind of cooling, soothing treatments, to address them. But then, we're looking at the differences between them and treating that accordingly.
So our goals when we're working with patients here at Prosper in regards to skin health and really in regards to our barrier systems in general are to make sure that we're getting first and foremost the building blocks. So we want to look at people's nutrition and making sure that they're getting that hydration, as we talked about, 70% of the skin being water, so important. Making sure they're getting those healthy fats, because we know that's like 3% of the skin. That's an important piece of having those lipids. We want to make sure that we're protecting those microbes and producing a healthy environment for those microbes so that they can have that healthy acid mantle to live on. And then thinking about the topical products that we're using becomes a very important piece for us. And within that, protecting that microbiome, we're also thinking about modulating inflammation and keeping that inflammation reduced. So there are so many different ways that we like to address that. So one of those ways is thinking once again about those constitutions and thinking about what might be out of balance for people and supporting them with different either herbs or topicals that can be helpful for whatever imbalance they have going on. Additionally, we'll use things like antioxidants to help reduce free radicals, which we know increase inflammation and can cause damage. We want to make sure that we're addressing other organ imbalances because the skin is an organ of elimination. When there's excess stress on other organs, say liver, kidneys, our skin can be the recipient of that and can show signs of that. We also want to, of course, reduce allergens because they're going to increase inflammation and mast cell activity. And so we want to make sure we're reducing those as much as we can, avoiding internal and external chemicals that might be damaging to us. And then UV damage, of course, has to be discussed with skin because we know that it's our barrier. So when we're talking about sun and UV, that's the organ that's going to take the brunt of that kind of free radical damage from UV exposure. So when we're talking about these cleansing organs, we're really talking about these organs of elimination. And I love this imagery of trying to take out the trash before the door is open. Like if you're trying to take out the trash in your house and you're just kind of throwing it against the door. I feel like that's the same way whenever we're trying to do any kind of cleanses or detoxing. If we don't have those organs of elimination open and functioning properly, then we're essentially just getting into these stores of toxins and toxicants, chemicals in our bodies, and causing more inflammation and more damage when they don't have proper exit pathways. So we really want to support these organs of elimination. It's such a very important piece of our naturopathic medical schooling to talk about these key organs that really do help us rebalance the body by moving these chemical and inflammatory components out. We often associate liver being as one of the most important ones because it does so much of our chemical biotransformation to help us remove these toxins. But of course, our kidneys are doing a big portion of this. Our colon is doing a big portion of this. So peeing and pooping, our lungs need to be taken into consideration because they're processing a lot of chemicals as well through our air exchange, and then our lymphatic system and our skin. And those kind of go hand in hand. So the skin is obviously what we're here to talk about today, but we wanted to point out that if you're dealing with imbalances in any of these other organs, then a lot of times the brunt will be pushed onto another eliminatory organ. So this we see a lot with our eczema patients, with our psoriasis patients, with our acne patients in particular. They may be dealing with these other organs not fulfilling their needs as far as elimination for cleansing the body and keeping that homeostasis regulated. And so what we end up seeing is these pathologies on the skin itself. So this the other piece here is that the skin is such an eliminatory organ that some people really tend to express a lot of inflammation through their skin. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, although it can be uncomfortable, but it's an important sign that the body needs to have these other organs looked at and addressed. So we always want to think about the whole picture, and I feel like that's one of the things that we really try to do from the naturopathic perspective, is thinking about all of these and how they interplay. So when we're thinking about doing a cleanse or some kind of detox program, we really want to be making sure that it's taking all of those different eliminatory organs into consideration. And the spring and the fall are traditionally the best times. These are transition times to do these kind of cleanses. We have one on our website if you guys are interested. That's it's a cleanse that you can go through on your own, and it's a self-guided cleanse, and we give you all the information through a little app that'll help you with the diet and any supplements that you might want to add on to that. So that is an option, and it can be a really helpful starting place whenever you have skin disorders or skin imbalances, or you're starting to see changes in your skin that you're not wanting to see, as far as like increased sped up aging and things like that. So that's just a resource for you guys if you want to check it out. We also, of course, have to address what is coming in as far as the daily foods. So we know that synthetic preservatives, chemicals, food additives, coloring agents, all of those things are going to deeply affect our microbiome of our skin, and they're going to increase our inflammation. So those are all going to be things that we should really assess and remove from our diet as much as possible. We really want to be having whole foods whenever possible, locally sourced, because they're going to be more nutrient dense a lot of times. And we want to make sure that we're really thinking about those things that we're putting in our body, as far as the foods and how they're going to ultimately be impacting our skin, our barrier system. This is a really awesome, just informational component that's put out by the Environmental Working Group every year. And there's a list that comes out of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 13. So if you haven't checked out this year's list, it's a really easy, quick Google search. And every year they come out and they say, what are the top 12 produce options that are out there that are going to be the highest in pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and chemicals that are damaging for the body. And that can be really helpful to know that Dirty Dozen, especially if you're, having to choose food from a restaurant or something like that, that you might not be able to source a clean organic source for something, you can make choices to avoid those foods that are conventionally grown that might be exposed to more chemicals. And then the Clean 13 is a list of those foods that are typically not being exposed to those chemicals. So we want people to be aware of that, and whenever possible, eat organic, clean food that don't have pesticides.
Okay. So a couple of other dietary pieces here. Um, one is that we really want to pay attention to sugar intake. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have this kind of very altered idea of what amount of sugar is normal. Uh, the average American consumes 46 teaspoons of sugar per day, which is pretty wild. And really just kind of getting sugar to, especially refined sugar, to a minimum and to just kind of special occasions is one of our main things that we want to focus on for, particularly when we're talking about acne and these inflammatory conditions like psoriasis and eczema. There's a lot of interaction between sugar and insulin and our blood sugar at any given time with our immune system. So, as we were kind of talking about the role of our immune system in those inflammatory conditions, lowering our sugar is going to help regulate our immune system and kind of stop the over response and then under response that we'll see with dysregulated blood sugar. Um, so that's kind of the main connection. We also really want to pay attention to the microbiome that Dr. Molly was discussing before, and sugar can really exacerbate um, certain microbes even in our skin, like candida, and kind of change the balance that we've established for ourselves. So good thing to pay attention to. And then the next thing we really want to focus on is food sensitivities. So this can often be life-changing when people have been sensitive to either like a larger extent or more of a low-lying extent for their whole life, and just haven't been able to identify that as a cause. So, sometimes that's gluten, sometimes that's cheese, but sometimes it's like almonds or strawberries or something that we don't think of as, no one has ever said might be affecting us negatively before. And so really in a perfect world, our best way to do this would be doing an elimination reintroduction diet. So this would just be going to a very, very simple diet, and there's different ways to do it. Sometimes there's like the lamb and pear diet, or, these really kind of pared down diets where you're focusing on a few foods and then expanding from there. So you allow your system to kind of reboot without all of those added influences. And then you slowly reintroduce things over the course of a few months. And if you've been dealing with, long-term systemic eczema or psoriasis, for example, sometimes that can be worth it. It's just a lot of work, but it can give you really good, solid answers on how those foods are actually interacting with your body. And then we've got these food sensitivity panels that we often use to help guide an elimination diet. And so rather than cutting everything out, we look at what your immune system is reacting to. And the thing to remember is it doesn't always correlate with symptoms, but it gives us much better kind of targeted set of foods to then work with. So we'll cut all of the foods that are high out for, say, 3 months, and then reintroduce them, kind of depending on your level of reactivity. And this can be super useful in kind of making an elimination diet more manageable. Another thing we really want to focus on is movement. So, movement is going to help us get our blood circulation going, which if you can imagine, we have capillaries all over our body that are feeding our skin cells. And when we are activating our blood circulation, we're sending blood and nutrients and waste disposal everywhere in our body. And our skin is a huge component of that, that's kind of on the exterior. And when you're stagnant and not getting any exercise, is when you'll often start to see skin problems arising just from a lack of circulation. Our lymph plays a huge role in this. So when we move and kind of contract our muscles, we're sending we're sending a lot of waste through this corollary vascular system that is kind of like our blood vessels, but goes alongside them, and it carries things back to our heart to then eliminate it. And really the main way to stimulate the lymph system is through movement. So what type of movement and how often and what you're doing is so individual. I really love for people to find things that bring them joy and that can add to your life rather than being another obligation. So I love having those conversations with people. But this is one of our key ways to support our skin in addition to so many other things about our health. And this is just a great reminder that inversions can be really good for supporting our lymph flow as well. So particularly if you have any swelling at your ankles from your veins being enlarged, or you have any heart conditions that cause a stasis, that can often affect the skin, particularly in your lower legs and your feet. And so doing an inversion pose like this with your leg up the wall, or even just having your legs above your heart at points in the day, can be really helpful, in addition to gentle, massage and lymphatic drainage as well. Another thing that we love to pay attention to is therapeutic sweating. So as Dr. Molly was talking about, we have all of these ways of taking the trash out, and sweating is one of the ways of opening the doors and really excreting our trash in a way that is, that's healthy and allowing us to actually eliminate it versus just mobilizing it and having it kind of circulating in our bloodstream. So you can do sweating through a number of ways. Getting intense exercise is a great way to do it, because it's going to kind of help with your circulation and your metabolism in many ways, in addition to just the sweating. But if you have access to a sauna or a bathtub, those are other great ways to do it. And just sweating in and of itself can be really great for increasing our metabolism.
And this is also a really good place for us to remind you guys that antiperspirants are going to be blocking some of that eliminatory pathway for us. So we want to really move away from choosing antiperspirants, even though that's part of our societal expectation, and instead, whenever possible, move towards using good quality deodorants that are not going to have chemicals in them that are going to affect either the microbiome of your armpit area, nor are they going to cause other kind of issues with absorbing chemicals, especially being so close to breast tissues for both male and females. So we want to be thinking about ways to really support that organ of elimination of the skin through sweating, and not cut it off, not stop its healthy pathway. So of course we couldn't do a presentation about skin without addressing skin cancer and UV rays, and how those UV rays can be very damaging. So this is how this works for those who are interested. Basically, the sun comes through here and emits these UV rays, and our DNA of like within the skin cells themselves gets hit by those UV rays, and it actually causes them to break. So it breaks apart our strands of DNA. And what happens when we have those chunks of DNA disrupted by those breaks is it actually changes the cellular signaling, the messaging is changed that DNA that's still there is providing. And what it happens is it allows for this over reproduction of cells. And that essentially, I mean, that is our definition there of cancer, is these cells who've lost the ability to stop replicating. So they lose this function called apoptosis. So they can't stop the cell division. So from continuing. So what we want you guys to walk away with for information here is that there are essentially 3 different types of skin cancers. There's basal cell carcinoma, there's squamous cell carcinoma, and then there's our melanomas. And melanomas out of the categories here are by far the most concerning. And we have different stimulations for these different predispositions for these 3 different types of skin cancers. Our basal cells are almost always associated with the sunlight and this pathway right here. Our squamous cell carcinomas can, of course, be influenced by this UV pathway, but what we often will be seeing with those is they can almost look like unhealing wounds. So we'll have patients come in saying like, oh, I have this like acne lesion that's just not healing. And, that could end up being a squamous cell carcinoma. So we put for you guys here some of the most common locations, just so you can be thinking about this, that these different cancers can show up in. So we've got basal cell showing up in those really sunlight prone areas, head and the backs of the palms and the tops of the feet. We've got our squamous cell carcinoma, which often will show up on legs for people, although it'll show up in other places too. I've definitely seen that on face. And then melanomas can show up in they're kind of different areas depending on genetic backgrounds for people. So just so you guys could have a good visual, we didn't want this talk to just be all a whole bunch of crazy pictures of different skin rashes and stuff like that, but it's good to get a visual on what these skin lesions can look like, these skin cancers can look like. Melanoma, that most dangerous type, can really be that darker patch, and you see these uneven borders. That's kind of what helps us differentiate that between like a normal mole or nevus. And so that's something that we're often looking for, is those irregular borders. Our basal cell carcinoma is our most common form. Remember, that's the one that's often associated with the UV damage in sun exposed areas. As long as it's caught early, then often it can be removed, but it'll often appear at kind of like a red mole or a little sore at first. The squamous cell carcinoma is the one that I was just talking about that can look like a lesion that's not healing, like an ulcerated lesion. Sometimes it can be a little bit scaly around the edges or crusty appearing, but this one can definitely spread. You can see here just what they look like within the epidermis as they start to get deeper. And the concern with the melanoma being more aggressive is that it can reach the vascular system in the derma much faster than these other forms of skin cancer. And so that's where we get worried about metastasis of this cancer and it, causing serious problems and ultimately death. So if you have an irregular lesion, have somebody look at it, have a professional take a peek at it. Dermatologists are fabulous in this arena, and there's so many new techniques for not just biopsying and testing, but also for surgical techniques for repair after these lesions are removed. And the important piece there is that the entire border is removed. So all of those cells, every single one of those cancerous cells is removed during that treatment course. So with cancer, skin cancer, of course, you guys know that UV damage is so very important to avoid. So how do we do that? The best is shielding ourselves. So protection from the sun, things like hats, especially full brimmed hats, shade, long sleeve pants. Those kind of things are our first line of defense for our skin. We also know that sunscreen is very important. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we often like our patients to get about 15 minutes of sun exposure a day without sunscreen so that they can get some vitamin D, but then making sure that they're having sunscreen, especially on skin that's exposed to high amounts of UV, especially if you're out on the water or something like that. Remember that cloud cover day does have quite a bit of UV reflection, so it's not like we're totally protected even on the cloudier days. We know from the studies that vitamin B3, niacin, nicotinamide, actually helps reduce basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma recurrence. So this is a really beautiful tool. We see a lot of dermatologists recommending this, and it's something that we recommend here at Prosper for our patients who have been diagnosed with basal cell or squamous cell carcinoma. And typically we're starting that dosing off at 500 milligrams twice a day. And remember, B3 can be very heating for the body. So we're careful about the dosing, and that's something we're happy to work with you guys with if that's something that you want to start for your skin health regime. But it's a pretty great thing. And one of the theories about how that works is it helps reduce that free radical damage that's done by that UV damage. So we also know that according to the literature, people who drink alcohol are at higher risk of skin cancer. So once again, that alcohol is going to increase the free radical load in the body and reduce antioxidants that are available to protect our skin. So that puts us at higher risk. So we want to be cautious about that.
Okay, so next we're going to talk through some supplements that we like to use for supporting healthy skin. And we just want to remind you that we have an incredible dispensary at our disposal at Prosper Natural Health. And you are our dispensary, and things are more open now because of after our COVID restrictions. So as long as you're wearing a mask, you can come in and check out our dispensary for purchases. And there's a lot of work we put into vetting these products. So it's different than going to any supplement store and, where you're just have less assurance that what you're getting is good quality. So I, just want to put in a plug for that resource for you. So one of our favorite antioxidants that's particularly useful when it comes to reducing squamous cell carcinoma recurrence and melanoma recurrence is this Bracco Protect supplement that contains sulfourathane. Sulfourathane are very powerful antioxidants that help mitigate that free radical damage from UV radiation. And so, this is one thing that we'll often include in a regimen for skin cancer prevention and for many other things, but particularly for that end goal. And another one that I really like to include for reducing inflammation and protecting against skin cancer is curcumin. So we have a number of different forms of curcumin. This is an extract of turmeric, that's a, a spice that you may be familiar with, that's in curries and a number of kind of like tends to be more in like an Indian based um, cuisine. Sorry, I was blanking on that term. So here we've got some of our products. Curcuma Veil is a really great one that has a very bioavailable form of curcumin, really great for things a lot of different inflammatory conditions, from arthritis to our inflammatory skin conditions that we've been discussing. And then we've got a couple of different forms here, kind of depending on your needs and how you react to different formulations. Um, so there's lots we can do with herbal medicine for skin health. And we do it in many different forms. So we have external applications. This can be in the form of just applying an herb like aloe directly to your skin. We can make salves. We can do herbal washes where we make a tea and then kind of soak our face with it, or various parts of our body that we need to address. And we have some wonderful herbs in that category that I consider the more external category. So that's calendula. Um, the flowers are used in the form of a succus, which is a kind of fresh extract of the flowers, or in a salve. And then we have comfrey and plantain leaf. We carry a really great salve by Wise Woman Herbs that has all three of those in it, and vitamin E. And I really like it as kind of a general ointment for helping with skin repair and helping reduce inflammatory skin conditions. Um, Aloe vera gel is something I use a lot for skin conditions, and it has a gentle and very consistent way of reducing inflammatory responses at the location itself. So really great if you have an area that is really burning and itchy and needs some anti-inflammatory support. We also want to think about supporting our bodies internally with herbs as well. So one of our organs that is involved in elimination is our liver. That's where we metabolize and kind of package a lot of chemicals to get rid of them in our body, often through our digestive system. And to support those pathways, we'll use liver supportive herbs like burdock, dandelion, and milk thistle seed. And these are all going to kind of open up that or aid the metabolism of things we want to excrete, so that they're not kind of getting backed up and then excreting from our skin in kind of a less consistent way.
So thinking about the skin in regards to aging and damage that can be done, we've talked about these antioxidants being helpful for reducing the free radicals. So thinking back to those with that sulforaphane and the broccoli side of the broccoli family and the turmeric, those are really helpful in that category of antioxidants. We also want to just take a second and talk about what that transition is that happens for the skin. We know that as we age, our skin becomes thinner and drier, and we're more prone to things like wrinkles. And what we see is the network here, this connective tissue that's filled with our collagen fibers here, starts to become less supple, and it starts to degenerate here, and we can have these sagging and thinning of the skin itself. And so there are different things that we know that will help speed up the aging process or things that can help slow it. And of course, many of us are wanting to slow this process and keep our skin as strong of a barrier system as possible. And it ends up being a reflection at the same time of how healthy that collagen network is underneath. So we can take collagen. That's one option, is thinking about taking the nutrients themselves to help build that collagen network. So we can take it directly, either in the form of these collagen peptides. You can get versions that are not just extracted from beef or pork. So the most common types are extracted from beef, which we recommend grass-fed beef for. But there's also marine collagens that are options for our pescatarians that are great options. And we also have, for our vegan folk, we have all these building blocks that will help the collagen network itself. But unfortunately, there are no vegan sources of collagen. They're all animal-based protein sources. We also have good old gelatin, which many of you guys may have had over the years. And this is a form that provides quite a bit of collagen. The collagen peptides now that are available on the market are just easier for the body to extract the collagen out of, rather than taking the gelatin and having to go through some bioconversion. So we've made a little list of these pieces that help with our collagen, vitamin C being the predominant of these. We know that vitamin C is absolutely critical for this. So making sure we're getting enough C in our diet, which should be coming in through your fruit and veggies, typically, but sometimes through a multivitamin or some extra vitamin C. And making sure that we have sulfur in our diet or in our supplementation. And we should be able to get that through different either dark meat foods or eggs, or there's also some in certain veggies like garlic, I believe, has some sulfur to it. And then our zinc and copper. And then many of you have probably heard of hyaluronic acid, which on its own can be a pretty expensive supplement, but is also considered to be a building block for this collagen network.
Okay, so next we're going to discuss hormones and how they affect our skin. And we're going to talk through some ways to test them and how to kind of address our hormones through hormonal support and through herbs and diet. So here, we just want to kind of reiterate that our hormones, play a huge role in our skin health. I was mentioning before, we'll often see patterns where prior to menses, acne will worsen. Postmenopausally, often people will get kind of, thinner skin or worsened skin conditions because there's less of that kind of plump collagen network to work with. And then also, one thing that some people don't expect is perimenopause can really exacerbate skin conditions like acne. And sometimes people will be like, I'm in my 50s and I'm getting acne, and I thought I was done with this as a teenager. So life brings us these surprises, but there's a lot we can investigate about our skin health through hormonal testing. So when it comes to hormone testing, we've got a number of different tests that we want to look at. And let's see, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Oh. It seems that I am frozen. I'm not sure if you all can still hear me. Okay, it looks like Dr. Molly just had something happen on her end. So let me pause the presentation here real quick, and I'm going to bring the PowerPoint up. My apologies for the interruption. Okay, just another second here. I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint real quick. Okay, let's come back here. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. Okay. So here we've got a couple of different options for testing. We've got our blood levels, we've got salivary testing, and we've got finger prick testing. Testing blood can be very straightforward because we're used to getting blood draws, and you can test a number of hormones that way reliably. And we're often reaching to our salivary testing in order to get a better in order to get a more accurate look when we're using transdermal hormones. So when it comes to getting to monitoring hormones when we're using transdermal hormone therapy, which we use a lot in our practice, salivary testing is the only kind of accurate way to do that. And so we'll often do baseline testing to kind of see where your hormones are at, and then test every 6 to 12 months to get a sense of if you're in kind of a safe range for that hormone replacement. Here's an interesting slide that you can look through if you're interested. This is just to kind of show what does show up with serum testing and what does show up with saliva testing and what doesn't. And there's a lot of nuance into how we choose these tests, and that can be, have a really big impact on on the answers that we get. So Dr. Molly is back with me here.
Sorry, guys. That was pretty crazy. My computer just turned off and wouldn't turn back on.
Oh, no.
I know. I hope it's okay.
Yeah.
Become very attached to those things.
Technical issues.
We're
Yeah.
close.
All right. So here I'm just going to talk through the different things that are tested with specifically salivary testing. So we've got our estrogens, we've got E1, E2, and E3. These are 3 different types of estrogens and have different effects on our system. And then we've got progesterone, we've got testosterone, DHEAS, and cortisol. So each of these are going to affect our skin differently. Estrogen is really helpful for a lot of skin conditions. We want to make sure it's not in too high amounts because that can cause other problems in our body. But it's, one that we're often thinking about when someone has acne or, postmenopausal skin issues. Testosterone, again, is high testosterone is very implicated when it comes to acne. And this is a really useful test for seeing if that's at play. And then these DHEAS is a precursor hormone that shows us what's happening further up in the hormone cascade, and if we need to address anything with hormone production. And then we've got cortisol, which is our main stress hormone, which can also play a huge role in our skin health and in our other hormone levels as well. Do you want to talk through the
Sure,
steroid pathway?
sure. So we've wanted to include this slide just for those who are interested in it so that they can go back and refer to it later. But essentially, these are our steroid hormones, and they start with cholesterol, as you can see, and then we have a change down to pregnenolone, and then this helps us shift down to progesterone, and DHEA is over here. We've got our testosterone over here and our estrogens over here, and our cortisol is part of this pathway too. So the reason we wanted to include this is the balance of these are very dependent on each other. So your estrogen is going to affect your testosterone levels, and your progesterone levels are going to affect your testosterone and estrogen levels. So we want to not just think about these hormones on their own as individuals, but instead in a group together in combination. So when we're thinking about hormone replacement, especially when we're thinking about it in regards to skin and skin health, we often will be talking to our patients about what their labs are looking like and deciding with them what level of intervention is appropriate. They may just need some diet and lifestyle changes that can help promote certain hormone pathways. Sometimes they also will benefit from phytoestrogens or phytoprogesterones or phytotestosterones. What that means is plant-based or herbally derived hormonal supportives. We also offer in our practice bioidentical hormones, and those are typically gotten at compounding pharmacies that we work with. And so we'll come up with a very specific recommendation for each patient. They'll have different milligram amounts that they need, and maybe even at different times having adjustments to those different amounts of hormones that are specific to what they had off in their testing or what they're having issues with keeping balanced. And then there are also the more synthetic conventional hormones. We don't use those in our practice, but we're very well versed in them, and we often will help patients who may be on those converting away from those to get on the natural bioidentical hormones, because we see those having such less side effects and risks. So our phytoestrogens are pretty powerful. These are these estrogen mimicking plants. So we've got several different antioxidants within those. Genistein is one of our strongest, and it's one of our isoflavonoids. And these are actually converted within our microbiome in our gut to become estrogenic compounds, which basically will fit these cellular receptors, these estrogen receptors. And that can be really a very helpful thing for us, because often they will modulate these effects of having low estrogen in our system without having the risk profile that perhaps giving an estrogen directly might. We know that this helps with our vaginal cell maturation. So remember, that's part of our skin barrier system too, there, that mucosal lining of the vaginal system. And that can help reduce things like vaginal atrophy or vaginal dryness, which can cause a much higher risk of UTIs and other problems as we age, and discomfort down there. And then it can also help modulate things like our bone health. That's another talk. So our phytoestrogen sources, I know you guys have all heard of soy and probably have heard of flax. Don't forget that things like fennel and sesame, alfalfa and red clover, and then we've included several different foods over here for you to take a look at too. So even our carrots and our apples and licorice root, even those are mild phytoestrogens. So something to remember. Now, we also wanted to take a second and not just talk about, hormones, which we know will help with skin and keeping our skin from aging and helping with the elasticity of that skin and that collagen network. But we also wanted to make sure that we just addressed daily skin routines. And there are so many different options for this. But what we wanted to say is it's important to think about what's going on for you in regards to your constitution, and what's going on for you in regards to the different areas of the microbiome of your of your skin, especially when we're thinking about your face. But this really extends to not just the skin on your face, but also thinking about having some kind of moisturizing routine for the rest of the skin on your body. So often, especially as my patients age, I'm talking to them, and we're talking here at Prosper to our patients about things that they can do after they bathe or shower to help capture the moisture back into their skin so that they're not over drying their skin and having dysregulation with the microbiome of their skin as a secondary result. So one of the things that we'll often recommend is using an emollient like shea butter, or using something even like aloe or coconut oil, depending on, or sesame oil, depending on their constitutional type, to help capture that moisture after they've showered for the rest of their skin other than their face. Now, as far as cleansing routines for your face, once again, that really depends on what's going on with that, your constitutional type, and what's going on with your skin itself. But we often want to help promote moisture in that area, but reduce excessive oil buildup for a lot of people. So sometimes we'll have people do honey packs, so they'll be cleansing with honey. Sometimes I'll have people add a little bit of cinnamon to that if they have an excessive amount of oil or major problems with acne, as long as it's not that heating form of acne that's very red and irritated. In that case, we avoid the cinnamon because remember, it's a little bit too heating, but we can use that antimicrobial action of the raw honey to be very soothing and a nice antimicrobial instead of something like a harsh soap, which is going to disrupt the microbiome of the face. So that ends up being a good cleansing agent. Another thing we'll often do is essentially it's called an oil pulling for the face, where you actually will use an oil like avocado oil, or sometimes, once again, we'll use things like coconut oil or even olive oil. And we have people apply that to their face and then take a wet, warm washcloth and steam their face and wipe the excess oil off. And that becomes a cleanser because we'll open up those pores, and the sebum glands can express with that too. And that fat kind of helps dissolve the other fat. So like fat can help with other fat, just if you think about like salad dressing, how it divides. So the water can actually, for some people, close those sebum glands down and trap the fat in there. So doing these oil pulling methods can actually help extract those when they have excessive amounts. So, and then the last piece is having some kind of moisturizing routine. If you're not doing that oil pulling, for example, you may want to add some kind of good clean oil or cream to your face. And oftentimes we're talking about these things called those emollients, like the shea butter, although that can be too tacky for some people as far as the consistency. And so we'll even use things like colloidal oat salves and things like that. So there's so many different options, and we always like to talk with our patients about those, but there should be some cleansing routine and moisturizing routine that's avoiding chemicals, especially fragrance filled creams that are going to affect your microbiome. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Mary. She's going to talk about Chinese medicine.
Thank you. Okay, so here I'm going to just discuss the ways of looking at different skin conditions from a Chinese medicine perspective, and how we treat skin conditions using Chinese medicine techniques. So before I was discussing the Ayurvedic idea of constitutions, and that is also very present in Chinese medicine. We really like to look at the individual in front of us and how they're presenting. So is their skin dry? Is their skin oily? Is their skin red? And just like, in naturopathic medicine, we don't have a one fits all protocol for skin issues. That's similar in Chinese medicine as well. In Chinese medicine, there's this concept that the exterior reflects the interior. So we're often looking at our skin and our tongue, and these exterior signals to tell what is happening interiorly. And there's even different parts of the face that correspond with different organs from the Chinese medicine system, different like internal organs, and can almost be used as a diagnostic tool in addition to helping us know where to go with treatment. That's very interesting stuff. So some of the in Chinese medicine, a lot of these theories were designed before we had these ideas of bacteria and viruses causing disease. And they had these ideas of pathogenic factors such as heat, dryness, damp, cold, and blood stagnation is causing issues in the skin. And so we want to look at that as we choose what kind of herbs we're going to use. So, if we're have a heat type condition, we want to use cooling herbs. If we have a dry type condition, we want to use moisturizing herbs. And we also want to look at the organs involved. So there are these concepts of the Chinese organs in Chinese medicine, and they're connected to acupuncture lines and meridians, and also connected to different parts of our skin. And so these are not kind of the same as our Western concept of the organs, but they're very similar. And they include the heart, spleen, liver, and lung. So, imbalances in those organs, particularly in the liver and the lung, can really affect our skin and the way it presents. And then we also have emotions that can play a huge role. We know from a Western perspective that psoriasis, for instance, is very responsive to emotional stressors. And this is, largely true with many skin conditions. And then diet plays a big role as well. So whether or not you're, using or consuming a diet that is in line with your constitution and what your individual needs are can really play a big role in your response, and particularly what shows up in your skin. Okay, so when it comes to herbal medicine, we have a lot of internal formulas, and these are really interesting combinations of herbs that have been used for thousands of years. And, sometimes they'll contain anywhere from 2 to 16 herbs. And so that is often to kind of support any underlying imbalances that are internal that are affecting our skin. So, a weak liver, or, when your liver is kind of overacting on the rest of your body, for instance, we want to address that with internal formulas. We also have external ointments and pastes and plasters, and this gets very, in depth. In Chinese medicine, there's a lot of ways we can address kind of more intense skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis by using a bunch of these herbs in combination and mixing it in different media. And so we'll often powder these herbs and just stick it directly on your skin. So one example of just a single herb that is used in Chinese medicine is dandelion. And this is a cooling and drying herb. So it's bitter, which has a cooling and drying effect. And this is going to be used for kind of damp and hot conditions. So if you think of like a really red kind of pustular acne, that's one where we would use it. And this you can use in a bunch of different ways. So you can drink it as a tea to support your liver. You can eat the leaves in a salad, for instance, and you can also apply it externally as a wash. So you make a tea and then kind of apply it to your face for that cooling effect. So we also use acupuncture a lot in skin conditions, and the goal of acupuncture is to unblock the channels. So, again, our skin of our face and the rest of our body is very related to um, these channels that connect to our internal organs. So we're often kind of using acupuncture to move energy and move our blood to support the skin. And we're often using acupuncture to relieve tension lines and wrinkles. So acupuncture is really good when it comes to affecting the nerves. And one thing that is kind of a whole, modality in itself is facial acupuncture. So this is a way in which we're stimulating specific points to bring blood flow to an area. From a Chinese medicine perspective, we're unblocking those meridians and moving qi and blood. And we can also affect the nerves of that area. So so there's, a major nerve that comes out right here. And I hate to compare it too much to Botox, but a lot of people get these expensive Botox treatments where they get an injection right there, and it helps relax this area in order um, to slow the formation of wrinkles. So, if you're kind of stressed and wrinkling your face a lot, it'll promote wrinkle formation there. And I like to use acupuncture in a way to address that as well. And you're basically stimulating those meridians and affecting the nerves at the same time to relax the nerves by kind of causing that overstimulation temporarily. And yeah, so this is a really great thing to consider if you are kind of worried about skin changes over time, or kind of feel like you need some support for your face. Facial acupuncture is a great way to go.
I got to talk to you about that, Dr. Mary. I've got that worry line. So as far as our next doc talk, we just want to make sure you guys are invited to that. We're going to be talking about sleep. So that'll be on July 12th. So you're totally welcome to join us then. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now, and we're happy to address those.
One chat there.
Oh, there it is. Okay, it looks like from Amanda. Okay. Oh, we answered it. Okay, good. So yeah, good question though. So there's lots that we can do for sun and for dealing with UV damage once it's been done, but ultimately continuing to protect ourselves from further damage is going to be primary in that. But we do love that B3 and those antioxidants to help reduce that damage further damage happening. So all right, you guys, thank you so much for participating today. And we just love doing these, and we'll look forward to seeing you for our sleep chat in July. Hope you guys have a good start to your summer.